Welcome to the fourth technical session on introduction technical session on key technical aspects to know the CBSE branches. May I ask what is this? Mr. Jain to please welcome Mr. Vittal Raja on the desk. May I also request Mr. Jain to please hand over a floral bouquet to Mr. Vittal Raja. Yeah. Members, the speaker doesn't require more introduction. However, it is our privilege to introduce him to this august gathering. Mr. Vittal Raja is a risk assurance and consulting expert and trainee with over 25 years of working experience. Has a wide client range from IT governance, cybersecurity, privacy, IT assurance, risk management, risk-based internal audits. By qualification, Mr. Raja is FCA, CISA, CIA, CISSP, CGIT, CISM, CRISC, CFCE, and accredited COBIT expert. So I think there's a huge list of introduction for him if we keep on doing it. But however, Mr. Raja has requested us to keep it very short. So now I present you before Mr. Raja. Thank you. Please, the dais is yours, sir.
Good evening to you all. Good evening. I know it is the last session of the day, and I am the firewall between you and your sweet home, right? I think you have had a download of information since morning, right? How many are already feeling very tired? Bitta enough, no? If I am having my Kannada right, bittu padapa saku, no? We call this in cybersecurity as a buffer overflow attack, right? Last session especially is going to be more and more of jargons. Yes. And I'll try to make it as simple as possible, and we'll certainly try to see. But yes, I think as speaker after speaker have been threatening you that you better beware, don't sleep, all that they have been telling you, right? So this session certainly will either put you to sleep completely because there could be a lot of things which are absolutely crazy, or, well, the fear always keeps us awake, isn't it? I mean, we have been getting used to threats in our life, yes or no? Auditor, 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 no? So sometimes we fear in certain circles saying that I'm an auditor. Right? That's the kind of status from what it was 25 years back when you say I am auditor. No? All that is gone. So I still remember today, of course, in whatever the environment that we see, which is completely digital, the first day when I entered my articles, obviously, the first time when you enter a slightly larger firm, there are more than 60 article clerks. You can imagine that you feel intimidated, isn't it? Because you don't know whom to go for, and everybody is looking to rag you. And then this gentleman who is the office administrator, one of the administrators, he comes and hands me a telephone directory and says, total it up. So I frankly had no clue, but religiously, fortunately, the guy next to me, he said, do it, do it. So I was totaling it up. Honestly, I discovered my proficiency in mathematics only then, because otherwise I used to fail in maths. What happened? This went on for 4 days. So I was wondering, articleship means totaling of telephone directory. Then 5th day, what I did was I did one little mischief. I said, who is going to anyway do the, check the totaling? So I put one total and simply just, fifth day, the same administrator came, he said, come here. Page number 47 and 48, you're not totaled properly. Go and do it again. I said, this fellow has the answers also about this. So he has been sitting and totaling separately. Then I found out that it is a practice in the firm that they got separate pages of that totals available readily. And the best way to test whether you are ethically right or not is this. The second thing was, then I later on when I grew up, fortunately, then I became friends. And I asked my friends, what is the idea behind this entire thing? Honestly, I myself discovered that my maths, counting, simple counting, because in those days, we never had any calculator, forget about it. Calculator was a luxury. We had adding machine, that too was given only to seniors. I don't know how many of you know about adding machines. I'm sure this generation doesn't know about it. The adding machine is you have something like this, what you call, I can't even describe that. You have to punch the number and put the lever every time. So that is plus. If you want to do the minus also, there is only plus and minus. You can't do anything else there. Right? Every time to push the lever, there is a small journal which will come out there, roll of paper. And that roll of paper is your lifeline because otherwise you lose the total. From then, which is 1988 to now in 2022, when we look at, imagine if you were in 1988 and I told you that on your telephone you can do banking. The only phone we knew was BSNL provided that black box, right? You had to dial. Today, I'm sure many of the youngsters don't even understand dial a number. Looks crazy. You guys should be absolutely out of your minds. And today we are doing banking. Already your grandmothers look at you when you're using the Bluetooth, Pavam, no, talking to himself. Right? So all that is happening. That's where the technology has taken us and it's becoming more crazier. How many of you are already talking to your TV? I'm sure, yes, isn't it? A lot of you. You would anyway in the coming days be talking to your car because anyway talking at home becomes difficult these days with your own people. So better because your son doesn't want to listen, daughter doesn't want to listen, right? Wife anyway out of question. So what do you do now? You start talking, at least you have now discovered you can talk to Alexa, you can talk to your TV, you can talk to the car. And tomorrow, not very far from now, these are also going to do banking for you. You know that Alexa banking is already there? How many of you do WhatsApp banking? I'm sure banks would have, promoted WhatsApp banking. Like default, it is available, right? In all this, 5 years from now, I'm not talking very far off. If you are the auditor of a bank, how many channels would you be dealing with? Any idea? WhatsApp is introduced as a channel. You're soon going to see several kinds of these embedded into the entire economy. This truth is already happening, yes? This is in the tier 3, tier 4 cities. How many of us would have thought that this Digital India, which was a failing program, was actually on the bright side of something called as COVID-19? Yes or no? There's a 400% rise in digital banking in India just during the pandemic times. And I'm sure if you go to the street, your own vegetable vendor says, GPay ide. No? That's how it's happening. This is a population which is not literate, doesn't know anything about all your risk management, cyber security, and whatever nonsense you're talking about here. For them, it is nonsense, right? But the huge burden is upon this community and the regulators to make sure their interests, he may not even understand English, it doesn't matter, he knows banking, to protect their interests. I think that is where the context of, I was here during the sessions of the last two fantastic speakers who had shared their ton of experience. All that, the responsibility doesn't go away, it's only increasing. So we have to keep these in mind when we are doing this, our work, and we have the huge job of really protecting their interests. Needless to say, I think frauds have been on the increase because during the pandemic times, one of the most prosperous industries was cybercrime. Because all of us were sitting at home. How many of you did mobile banking for the first time during pandemic? Many of our parents started doing, yes? Your kids had to be forced to be given the mobile. Classes are there in mobile. You have no choice. Till that time, you say no mobile, no mobile, no mobile. All that is gone. Now you cannot tell them only look at this. So things are certainly changing. And in this environment, if banking is surviving on your mobile, you can imagine. You can leave your wife at home, not your mobile. Yes? Because your KYC is there, Aadhaar card is there, everything is there. So the point really is hackers realize that than anybody else. And look at this fantastic figures. If you look at the first figure, 4,071 cases involving fraud of 36,000 crores of rupees in the first half of 2022. It's crazy. Whereas last year, look at these figures. You have 83,638 cases of digital fraud. Digital fraud. Financial 21 involving 1.38 crores, of which a small amount was recovered. And look at what is the average rate of fraud. 229 banking frauds per day in 2021. Amount recovered, less than 1%. And if you look at the number of incidents being reported to certain, what is being reported to certain is that much. You go to any cybercrime police station, God forbid you don't, you should not be victim of cybercrime. But if we are today, you try lodging the complaint, they'll say, sir, 80,000 cases are there. We'll take your case on priority. Now, what does it mean? You have to understand. Of course, fortunately, the government has done something. You have the 1036 number, which has been introduced, and that is pretty good. So anybody suffering a cyber crime or cyber fraud should immediately call a 1036 and report it. If you report a bank fraud within 24 hours, you have 95% chances of getting back your money. Also make sure you report it on cybercrime.gov.in. So this is something for everybody, because a lot of us are falling victims to bank fraud. Now, having said that, what was the largest fraud that we have seen so far in the recent years in banking history in terms of the corporate frauds? No, before that. It was also mentioned here, no? Punjab National Bank. Nirav Modi. How much was the amount? Anybody guess? 13,000 crores? Now we have new record set now. ABG Shipyard, which will come somewhere in your next year, and this year I'm sure there will be discussion. All the affected banks, SBI, ICICI primarily, and many other banks, we are going to see a huge shakeup. And what was it due to? Any guesses? Creating 95 dummy companies, routing transactions through those companies, a complete web of all bogus transactions. The big question is, who are the auditors? Is the usual question that will come up, right? So this is pretty scary to say, how do we go about? I mean, tomorrow, even if we are offered a bank audit, branch audit, we seem to be thinking twice, should I or should I not take it? Because, your confidence while signing, anyway, was never there in the past. In future also, it doesn't seem to be there. It is only getting worse. Always when we sign on the dotted line, that's what we do. Because you have to factor the risk of your article clerks having done things right. The bank manager haven't given you the right data. You are trying to discover through the CBS and all this, the kind of overwhelming of technology, right? And on top of that, you don't know every living day when RBI will issue a notice. So we have to understand that we have to live within all this. I think the words of Mr. Premnath, which I have been echoing for a long time, are very true. Unless and until we go about strengthening the risk management of our banks, there is no end to all this. Fortunately, we have a good leadership which is trying to push these things in, but I think we have our huge role to play, because the more the number of issues that we report in the LFAR, there will be pressure for the banks to take action. And it is already happening, because regulators are no more. Today, RBI is very strict. I'm sure you recently saw Paytm has been suspended for any transactions. So RBI clearly means business, right? So let us look at some of these key aspects. One, there have been significant aspects relating to IRAC prudential norms, which I'm sure has been discussed since the morning. There is a clear clarification that IFC on financial reporting shall also be applicable to public sector banks since last year. The new LFIR, I'm sure all of us are very conversant with that, and you know the kind of questions that are being raised there, including the one you have to identify the advances that you have audited, right? Mandatory unique customer identification has been introduced. Very important first step. Implementation is yet miles away. RBI direction, very important. 14th September 2020, mandated automation of NPAs and provisioning as part of CBS. This has been a huge area of, if I can say, gray area in the banks. Lot of, NPA not properly provided has been hidden on those systems because NPA was never really a part of CBS automation. RBI has identified that and they put strict strictures. The last of the lastest deadlines, extended deadlines was 31st December. So when you go into the audit, this is going to engage a lot of your attention. In fact, in this session, I'm covering significant aspects of this as well as we go by. Now, we have to also consider, because see, today RBI is clearly saying, even if you take your guidance note 2022 on bank audits, it clearly talks about your responsibility to understand the technology environment, do certain cyber security checks, not just at the HO level as a central statutory auditor, also at the branch level, which was never there before. So today we ask this question, why should I as a branch auditor look at cyber security control? What is there to look at in the branches? Actually speaking, there is very less to look at in the branches, but we have to understand the source of data origination is the branches. Do you agree with that? The source of data, wherever you take over the counter in the branches or customers attached to the branches, whichever digital channel they use. If you fall victim, your customer falls victim of a cyber attack, the provision will hit that particular branch. Right? That's how it will go. Now, primarily, obviously, needless to say, I'm sure it has been emphasized this morning, it is important to understand your audit environment. There is no two doubts about it. Here, I'm going to talk about the technology aspects. And I've been repeating year on year, you cannot audit what you don't understand. Right? If you don't know how NPA automation works, how can you go about auditing that? If you don't know what is the pitfalls in NPA automation, how will you look for that? So these are things which obviously happen over time. This I always consider as a very kind of simplistic representation of where our focus should be. Let us please understand, when we say CBS is the center part. Why do we call it as the core? Because it is like all others are merely the tentacles, right? Whether you take a digital banking mobile transaction being put through or a counter at the branch or wherever it is, everything is nothing but a node or a terminal to the central system, which is the core, which drives the entire core of your banking business. All your processes are ultimately lying there. But it is not just there. It is supported by a paraphernalia of software depending upon which bank you get for your audit. Because when you go for the rotation every couple of years, you have to spend some time in the first year of audit to understand what kind of technology and what kind of application does this bank operate. The State Bank's technology is completely different from, let's say, Canara Bank, even though both of them, let us say, may be using Finacle as their core banking software. But if you look at the digital channels, the digital software, the mobile banking software, the CRM software, the various kind of treasury and other software could be completely different. And the way they integrate with each other is also different. Right? So we have to understand the combination of not just core banking, but also other software, which makes a lot of transactions happen. And with this, why are we talking about the concern of cyber security being also part of the branch auditor's job? See, let us take a fundamental example. Forget about the banks. Let us say you're auditing a company, okay, a corporate enterprise, right? And let us say, after you completed your audit, you are going to sign the audit report. The IT guy comes and tell you, sir, all the data of this company, including the backups, have been hit by a ransomware attack. We are not able to retrieve any data. Would your opinion on the audit report change? You already audited. Let us say 31/3/2022, you have finished your audit, right, for that year. Before you sign, let us say you are ready to sign on 15th of May. 14th of May, this is the disclosure made to you. Sir, today onwards, there is nothing available. Does it change your audit report? Yes or no? Is this company anymore a going concern? Events occurring after balance sheet date. Is this company going concern? They say no data is available. Simple. We tried everything, data is not retrievable. God forbid your bank tells you this tomorrow morning. Central server gone, no data. You bring your passbook, we'll look at it and give you something. Think about the seriousness. Is it possible? Can you even think about it? You cannot. So now technology is one of the fundamental root causes or enablers for going concern. Yes or no? See, internet we are taking for granted, isn't it? Whenever you want, internet comes. Tomorrow morning they say internet ka chutti ho gaya. 3 days, no internet. What will you do? Raja. Permanent raja agbidate. So the point really is IT infrastructure is where all this foundation of this beautiful building of core banking system, everything is sitting. If the foundation is weak, can the building be strong? I don't know if you know, there is a comedian in Tamil cinema called Vadivelu. Anybody heard about him? He has this very popular dialogue saying, foundation weak, building strong. So that is why the RBI is specifically pointing out to say even branch auditors need to look at the point of origination of transactions, whether there are minimal, adequate key controls that got to be there. And the best person to check obviously is the auditor. So that is where, if you see, this is the core from which all the entries come. Where do the inputs coming? This is where the channels are, right from your counter banking to your wallet that you use, your GPay that you use, or whatever that you use, whether it is your NEFT, RTGS, NEFT, anything that you use, all that is called as channels. Every channel could use a different path and different system. You appreciate that? GPay is coming from a software that is installed on your mobile, links up to your bank account, comes through the payment gateway, enters your core banking system, enters your SOL ID. What is SOL ID? This is your system ID, right? That is your branch ID. So it comes to the branch ID and hits your branch ID. That is called the service outlet ID. So please understand that is one path which I just said. Your card payment will take a completely different route. Yes or no? It goes to the NPCI switch. Goes and checks your MasterCard, Visa card. Then comes and hits there. Then the debit comes to your account, right? So each of these channels has a flow of data that comes and hits ultimately your core banking, and that is how the books of accounts that's given to us come out of that. Take each of them, payments and settlements, you take partner systems, because who provides the mobile banking app? Some vendor that is hosted somewhere, virtual cards. They'll give you all these capabilities, isn't it? But if you start thinking as all the digital channels as an auditor of that particular branch, let us say, your own branch, then you'll understand the complexity of how these things work. So that is what we need to understand. And mind you, in all this, internal controls, credit policy, RBI directions are embedded as a logic. You understand what I'm saying? For example, in your GPay, you have a 100 rupee balance, okay? Can you transfer 1000 rupees? Possible? Possible if the code has a logic error. Yes or no? Yes or no? Cosmos Bank, 3 years back, got hit with a cyber attack. You know what was the cyber attack like? It totally lasted 6 to 7 hours. What happened in that 6 to 7 hours? The hackers were able to, see, first of all, let us understand how ATM works. ATM is again a core switch. It is connected to the core banking system. Then let us say all of us are ATM terminals. All of these terminals, once a customer comes to this point and asks for money, they have to first go to the switch, isn't it? Ask them, what is the balance of this person? He's asking 10,000 rupees. Can we give it to him or not? The command will come from the central switch, the ATM switch, to that system saying, you can dispense approved transaction. Then only the mechanical operation starts. Then you hear that operation, chick, 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 chick. Your money is coming out. What the hackers did, problem is these two people are talking, that's where the whole problem is, no? Cut it out. So they cut off the communication between the ATM switch and each of these terminals that they operate. But what did they do, you know? They created a fake switch, what is called as a proxy switch, and made all the terminals think that is not your mother, this is your mother. So what did the ATM terminals do? Whatever the mother says, it will do. So it will keep on giving instructions saying that actually there is no balance in any of these accounts. It in fact is fake card numbers. But it is telling the ATMs, dispense. Anybody having any of this card, any card, this fake card ID, putting in any terminal of that bank or anywhere in the Swadhan scheme, it will give cash. 12,000 transactions internationally across 28 countries were put forth within a matter of 4 hours, costing the bank 70 crores of rupees. How much? Internal controls commensurate with size and nature of business. We certify on that. So you can imagine the kind of responsibility today that we have. It becomes extremely important for us to understand the modus operandi of each of the cyber attacks, cyber frauds, or the corporate frauds. Extremely important from the LFAR perspective. Because then only we'll be able to report on saying what's going wrong. So that is where, if you see, your accounts come out of that, all your returns come out. So all this is nothing but the data that is coming out of that is what is churned and given there. If the internal control is wrongly configured, what is going to happen to the report? You will make a decision on that report. You will say creditor is a good, this borrower is a good borrower and give money. Then you say no, CIBIL system gave wrong information. Can you reverse it after the amount is disbursed? By the time can be perpetrated through these volumes. That's a separate subject altogether, right? So let us please put all this in one picture in terms of our responsibility in a bank audit. So what are we actually trying to do? It's a very simple bank balance sheet, branch balance sheet audit, isn't it? As simple as that. After all, there are some figures we are supposed to say whether it's correct or not, true and fair or not. And that's exactly where the problem is. Now, where do these figures come out of? They got multiple consolidations from the GL and various party ledgers called as returns, right? And what do the returns do? bring information in a particular format, and indirectly they fade into the GL, right? That contributes to your balance sheet, profit and loss account. That's why you have, if you see, when you go to the audit, you got actually the minimal sheets of paper are the balance sheet and profit and loss account, isn't it? All the other children are big ones, isn't it? All the returns, everything. So all that comes there, and we'll see that. Where does this come from? The culmination point is the CBS generally. Generally, the culmination point for this is serious. Coming from various, as I told you, CRM, channels, Swift, clearing. I'm just giving examples here. And each of them, if you really look at it, our job looks at, of course, at the top, a simple thing of audit of the financials, of which IFC and ICFR are a given, isn't it? It's a part and parcel of that. Second, look at this. This is where the key is. Branch system generated, head office system generated, returns, ledger accounts, reports. How many of you observed a day-end folder in a branch? What happens? After day-end is over, automatically a couple of reports are thrown into that particular folder. The branch has to go and pick it up, and believe me, there could be some easily to 50 to 100 files that are getting dropped there. But there is a separate section of exception reports. And I always say this is a gold mine for us in audit. You simply can take some of these reports and make it as an annexure in your LFAR. It is as simple as that. So just look for these gold mines, which is exception reports. In these branch folders, there is monthly closing has a separate set of returns, right? Annual closing has a separate set of reports, right? Please make use of that, and please do have a look at it. So that is extremely important. Then automation of all branch processes is a question mark. We have to answer. We may think, general thinking is CBS branch, everything will be automated. Don't take it for granted. Did you realize that till the RBI came out with this circular in 2020, NPA was not automated in many of the banks? How many of us knew that? Only if you have done the NPA black box audit, which is simply looking at your own independent computation, and you compared it to the system, you say this is something wrong, I cannot rely upon. Otherwise, generally what do? Sir, system generated agide, sir. Nah, we don't do anything. You start closely looking at it, you will find lot of interventions in that system. And that is how RBI discovered that each and every bank has its own way of doing NPA automation. So after introduction of a compulsory NPA automation as part of core banking system, and two, it has to be done as an ongoing activity now, not something which you say annual festival, we'll do it only at year end, all that is gone now. So automation of all branch process, we have to question that. Looking at transactions which are consolidated into the CBS from various apps is what gets into that. And here there is a key concern. Please understand, even in our office, when there are two systems, take for example GST return filing system and your tally of the client, will they always be synchronized? Even though you are maintaining, at any given point in time, it is not necessarily it will be synchronized. Yes, because unless you integrate them, they will not talk to each other. So every time you have to go and look for the gaps, yes or no? With regard to every system other than the CBS and the CBS, so you have to say CRM to CBS, is it reconciled? You will find there is a reconciliation suspense. ATM to CBS, is it reconciled? Reconciliation suspense. Wallet systems to CBS, reconciled? Suspense. This suspense is our nightmare. And the beautiful way of how do the banks handle it? You take many of these are called as parking accounts or suspense accounts in any, if you take the chart of accounts from the core banking system, you'll get what are all the suspense accounts, because on the final day that they give you the TB, what is the state of suspense account? What is the balance? How did it become zero? Either they naturally became zero, which is the right way of doing things, or they have been zero-fied. What do they do? You will find if you just take 1 week before transaction, they will transfer that to head office or zonal office. Have you seen that? Why did you transfer it to the head of his own office? It will be born again within 15 days. New Year, April 15th, Kannada New Year, it will be born again. Right? So the point is, why did you do that? And then if you start comparing, you will find differences. They'll say, you ask them, what is this? This is more than 40 days old. The last auditor also saw that. It's been there since then. It's more than 1 year? No, 3 years. 3 years you're supposed to report it in LFAR. No, we transferred it to a regional office. They are reconciling it. Then why did it get back? They wanted us some responding entries to be given. So all this tamasha goes on. That's why integration, any manual intervention is a huge red flag. RBI has given a huge responsibility to auditors now, saying you are responsible for identifying this red flag. Have you seen the fraud section in LFAR? How does it look now? There are several key questions that we have to answer. Many of them are very difficult to answer. We go back to our inter days. Auditor is a bloodhound or a watchdog. So ultimately, this is where, our ultimately whether we are going to live happily or not lies in signing the branch auditors report, audit returns, MOC, LFAR, return formats, tax audit report. This is the deliverables that we give. But to do this, the amount of working papers, I'm sure you have so many of the speakers talking about it. So let us please understand that each of them requires an understanding of how the transaction flow happens. If we understand that once, let us say 3 or 4 years of whatever bank that you get, if you understand in the first year, that is good enough a working paper for you across. And once you study once, believe me, you can very easily identify any other banks because there is no great different activity. The scheme is different, right? So you can identify that. Of course, I'm sure you know that the 3 most popular core banking software are banks, FlexCube, Finacle. Obviously, the most popular is Finacle, followed by State Bank Group banks and some other banks. Of course, FlexCube is still limited installation. But it is important that we understand to talk the language of these core banking software if we have to mine out our data, which is where I think we had an excellent representation from our senior Mr. Somnath, Mr. Premnath, and he explained that pretty well. I don't want to scare you with this slide, but this is a minimal implementation of a core banking software in any bank. This is nothing but FlexCube. You can download it from the internet. It's no great deal. But if you look at this, please see, this is where the transaction origination happens. I'm sorry, the slide is not clear. The transaction origination happens. Then the various delivery channels like ATM, all your instruments, which you POS that you use in the various bank, IVR, etc. Everything comes in there. And this is where the core, again, if you see the business modules, is accounts, deposits, if you have microfinance statement, this comes as part of the package, right? Treasury and investment. Treasury and investment in most of your banks that you audit would be a separate system, generally. Very few banks use the same, a vendor for treasury and for the investments, etc. So that's something. Similarly, customer support services, operation support, core services, all this forms a part of the bank's environment. Now, these touch the branch. Most of them touch the branch in one way or the other, directly or indirectly. Because ultimately, transaction has to come and fall in the customer account. No, there is no other choice, right? So, the expected outcome, if I can simply put it in a crux, I call it ICE. Number one, we are commenting upon the integrity of financial statements, and believe me, that is where one of the core is audit of standing and transaction data. That's what we do, right? If we have the right approach to this, the audit effort can come down by at least 80% of what we currently spend, if we know how to use. And, taking all the analytics mantras that Mr. Premath has also given, you can use a lot of that. Compliance with regulation is the second important thing. Compliance with whatever are the accounting standards, the auditing standards that are applicable, all that comes in as part of these requirements. In public sector, what is the applicability? In the private banks, what is the applicability? Accordingly, we need to do that. And all this is embedded in the various systems, and we need to obviously take cognizance of that. The last but not the least is the efficacy of the internal controls. The internal controls obviously as the bedrock of our trusting any accounts. So that is where if we spend the first year time in understanding the bank's internal controls, the rest of it is the same. You won't, you'll find that your job becomes extremely easy in the next year and all. We have to keep reminded ourselves of 315 because very, very clear, whatever all the knowledge that you got since the morning, right? Do you think 100% of it you will implement this year? Is it even possible? You will say, oh, so much is there. Okay, let me do something. 10%. Rest we'll see. It is a problem. I don't deny that. But the only way to get across is at least do a ABC analysis. Which are the high risk areas which will affect my financial reporting? If we do that much and say, at least let me this year take care of the top 3 key issues, you will at least make sure to that extent the audit risk will be reduced. And everything, one of my friends used to say, perform but inform. See, generally what we do is like we pick up say at the time of audit, we are there. We are energetically alive there in the environment. You do so many things. Much of it doesn't get recorded anywhere. Yes or no? If you have a simple system of recording saying that this person saw so many accounts, this person saw so many accounts, this factors were seen, this was done, this was done. What happens is tomorrow, let us say, if you're asked upon to demonstrate what did you do, you have your working papers, which itself are so impressive to look at to say, okay, this person has done something. As even I think it was pointed out well by Mr. Sonawala. He said, if you have done your job, need not be the best job you had done, but you made a sincere attempt and that's what will be counted. In fact, we have faced this in one of the foreign banks when it was a mess of a bank. They had only one branch in India and almost 80% was NPA at that time, I would think. But when we raised those issues, what happened was there was a CBI interrogation. They called us for reasons. What did you audit? And in one of the cases, because of the lack of information, we had suggested a particular provision, but that was not to the complete requirement. Fortunately, whatever facts were there were recorded somehow in the working papers. The RBI guys and the CBI guys took that, and fortunately, we were saved. Otherwise, honestly, I was thinking, okay, finished. And that audit of one branch took us 3 months. And the amount of tension that me and my team have gone through to complete that branch was terrible. Zero cooperation. Everything they'll say, no, it is there in headquarters. Headquarters where? Another country. That's a problem. If you ask anything, no, HO policy. Whose HO policy? RBI is here, boss. You are operating in this country. No. We operate by HO policy. It was such a terrible mess. Anyway, very important realization. All these are coming from my own realization. Your preparation for your bank audit does not start after you release the allocation letter. Please be clear. It is well before that. Right? Because now I know that only few of us have got the allocation letter. Right? And you will say, okay, let allocation letter come, then we'll see whatever these fellows are saying. Please don't do that. If you start working on this, in fact, Mr. Premnath is absolutely right, which I have been echoing over years. This branch audit, I'm telling you, what has happened to your income tax scrutiny? Becoming more and more electronic, becoming machine learning driven. Anything that is going to be repetitive and which is going to be reasonably decision making, what will happen? The same way will go. Branch audits, is that of the same order? 80% is of the same order. Everything can be predictably defined what needs to be done. Yes or no? They're pretty straightforward rules. If you audited advances, you have significantly done your work, isn't it? And if you really look at this, this is what is going to happen in the future. Maybe not 5 years, but 10 years down the line. Branch audits will be automated completely. There will be only documentation audit if at all that is left. That itself is also becoming automated because today, if you give a KYC, the machine can read the KYC, match the data. If you go to Google Lens or if you use the Google imaging, it can completely do all that. So we have to look at the risk part, and that is only where we'll be able to contribute. And I'm telling you, system audit and system risk is going to be there forever till systems are pulled out of the entire economy, which I'm sure is not going to happen. So first step first, of course, you have to build your audit universe. The first year, you have to profile the business of the branch. I'm sure all of us understand if a branch is dealing with, let us say, foreign debt or any kind of foreign exposures, we understand what is the risk, which was also explained. If there is bills, we understand it. So we have to profile the business of the branch and then the associated automation and assign some risk parameter, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, whatever you want to do. So that you know, these are the areas I will look at myself. This may be by a senior fellow in my firm, this by the staff. So what happens is your work becomes divided according to the skill set required. You are able to achieve a significant amount of work very easily. So this first step is very important, wherein you assess the materiality of the various areas of audit. 2, trend analysis. I mean, we think trend analysis is something. Let me tell you, please do this. Take previous year, possibly 2 years data, all on Excel sheets, and simply do a trend analysis. Very simple trend analysis of the various movement across the revenue items, across the balance sheet items, you will be able to spot something doesn't look okay here. And if you start drilling down into the next level of the ledger and look at the balances, you will find certain accounts which need your attention. We have tried it and it has worked for us in 80% of our audits. And I can tell you that it has saved so much of time on wasting your time on all unwanted audits areas, and you get to the risk areas. So please do that. And it certainly helps with regard to, see, during COVID time, suddenly you find there is a huge business growth in a particular, customer. It has to be only medical or something like that. Obviously, you would want to understand how come, let us say, a tourism industry is doing so well, unless there is something different about it. So those are indicators. The third important thing which I always say is, as I told you, our focus is the balance sheet, the profit and loss account, right? Now, that is something which we know well. All we need to ask the next question is, tell me, you ask the branch, tell me from which system or application software do the figures hit this particular GL head. 80% of the GL heads CBS will hit, but the source may be somewhere else. You get what I'm saying? When you take, for example, a retail savings bank account can be operated through all those channels, the 22, 23 odd channels, isn't it? But it comes from that origination point, gets into the churning of the CBS and gets posted to the GL. And that is where you saw in that particular slide, which I told you. The GL comes as the centerpiece. Right? So that is why it is hidden as the core. All the left and right hand side, you got many other software that is working. So please have this mapping. You may think, oh my goodness, so much of procedure. No procedure. This you ask your simply a second year article clerk to do that, he can do a pretty good job. Because all that needs to be done in the first year alone, do this mapping, which will be useful for all the years that you audit this particular bank. Right. And that I can tell you will be so valuable because you'll clearly know where you have to look at. Then, very important to understand control environment, which is also part of the previous audit standard. First, you have to look at, of course, as I said, the underlying automation levels, because RBI itself in the LFAR asks you for any gaps in automation, data integrity, and security being, whether it is adequate or not, or did you observe any aspects on that? These are important questions, but at the same time, these are very vague questions. Do you mean to say I start doing a data integrity audit? No, it is saying when you're doing just like a fraud analysis, when you're doing as part of your transaction analysis for balance sheet audit, did you come across any such issues wherein you have a suspicion on red flags? And that is what is required there. But for that, you must at least take a few samples and study them. In fact, I wanted to say this, maybe I'll say this here. If you simply read all these reports, have somebody simply tabulate this according to GL heads. Only high risk issues. I don't want you to note everything else. Only high risk issues, ask your junior or somebody to go through this who understands somewhat of banking and simply tabulate it. You clearly will be able to point out which are all the gray areas. Because in one of the reports, there will be some indication of this. And that can be very, very helpful to you. And for the youngsters, and especially those who are in the junior level in the audit firm, in my life, I have learned about business more from the study of the correspondence files in bank audits. You know what is correspondence files, right? Every customer, there are files, which is the correspondence, the various interaction that happen, the base data, etc. is there. Many of us, I've seen, we don't even look at those files, except for maybe the veterans here and those who have been that. The youngsters, they still don't know the importance. But believe me, forget about. Of course, it will be useful for you to get risk insights about the various borrower accounts. But you learn how a business works, how their dealings with the bank are, how they churn out the finance, how you relate that in terms of every balance sheet item living before your eyes. And certainly I learned that a lot. And that is going to be because the biggest problem between a corporate who is hiring, choosing between a chartered accountant and MBA is what is the reason? The chartered accountants talk a language which is not business-like. Unless and until we do that, we are going to be very unpopular. It's good that many of us are doing that already, but that's where the key lies. If you're going to give the sections, a person who is coming to you for tax advice, you say section so and so, say so and so, section so and so, say so and so, section so and so, you say, solution. If you simply tell him, boss, you go and invest in this bond so much, your tax is saved. He says, okay. So that is where the experience really counts. And for us, believe me, that perspective, especially for the youngsters, you will get it from study of the borrower files. I can challenge you that. I have learned a lot because the way you start looking at those and then you start discovering, in fact, in those days, we used to have amongst our peers a competition. In one borrower account, maybe it has a 50 crore exposure or whatever, we will write 10 pages. So we'll have a competition. You write how many points, I write how many points. But what happened was, because of that, we were able to understand the linkage between business, banking, the way that banking accounting happens in those days. Of course, now, for me, when I now get into a bank and look at this, because now I'm significantly into cybersecurity and risk management and the systems audit. If you simply look at this, thanks to my seniors who kind of drove me, I'm able to simply spot things like that, all because of them. My guru, my principal, he was a man of very few words. The only way we understood something was wrong with our working is when the file hit our face. And then we have to go with the other senior and find out, Appa, file, Munj, what to do, tell me where it has gone wrong. But we used to curse ourselves in those days why I joined the firm. Today, they are the reason for what the meticulousness with which we are able to see. So I think that's an important training that all of us need to have, especially when we are looking at systems, controls, automation. The God is in the detail in any system. And this is what we'll see. So key challenges, these are every auditor's challenges. How to know the source system of financial data, which financial data is coming from where, which account head is coming, which figures are coming from where. Mapping, I told you the answer, right? 2, do I need to learn the entire CBS and apps? See, sometimes you may get, I have to attend the CBS command course, and after attending also I can't remember, or you can't find that command which you want. You need not become an expert on commands. I always say, as I said, if nothing, you say, I hate systems. You simply make, as Mr. Premnath was also saying, make that fellow sit with you and simply say, I want this report, show me. But when you start seeing what those commands can do, you automatically start getting ideas. Oh, this report can then give me with this data. If you don't get that, get to the nodal officer, get to the data center. You will get all that data that you need, right? So very important that you need not learn about all this, everything in the CBS. In fact, most of the accession reports will give away a lot of things. You can very easily do that. And then, of course, a little bit of analysis that can get that. Then very, very important, which I'm going to touch again significantly today, is with regard to how to perform the audit of systems configuration, which is parameter. Parameter audit, I would also say, is the heart of any bank audit, especially branch audits, transaction audits in banks. How to use the CBS features? Of course, as I said, you have to understand a little bit about the CBS. How can you do that? Very simple. Every bank has a manual. You simply first get to that, but you don't have to by heart the manual. The institute has a bank audit guide, concurrent audit guide, which also gives you the list of one. But I would say don't even go for that. You simply try to understand with sitting with the banker, this data, where is this? What happens is day end reports. Would the banker look at every report? They will only look at the report is important for their day-to-day business. That's all. In fact, even the control reports that come, they will look at it later. But if you start focusing on that, and if you start looking at the reports, you'll be surprised to find, I am telling you, you'll be surprised to find that the data that you want for a LFAR is just there. You have to simply Control C, Control V and put it there and still use it. You can use that data. So that kind of thing is already available there. So how to identify system control issues? It's very easy, because if you start understanding internal controls, you will understand this better. Now, what is this parameter audit? Many people get confused. What is this parameter audit? I don't understand how this is. This is also called as standing data. But very simply, see, in those days, we had those, animal biscuits. How many of you know that? Giraffe-shaped biscuit. How many of you? Now these are not available, I think. It was a great, craze in those days. Yes or no? Oh, you got giraffe. I don't have giraffe. No. How do they make those biscuits? There is a die, right? You put the dough and simply just make the biscuits, right? That die is nothing but the configuration of the parameter. Every transaction data that passes through it, it will simply put the same. So if for one giraffe, one leg is missing, what will happen to all the giraffes? Because in the die you have not configured it properly, right? If for an elephant you put horns, what will happen to all the elephants? They'll have horns. So that is where standing data works in a core banking system. If the configuration of the core banking interest parameter, for example, is wrongly configured, every transaction that is going through that will have a wrong computation of interest, needless to say. That is why one of the fundamental requirements is to do a parameter audit. And the transaction is nothing but the day-to-day transactions that go through, which is nothing but the line items is what it comes. So the columns are the parameters, the line items are the records, right? In Excel sheet, right? That's how it works. So then, of course, this always problem. On one hand, we have many senior professionals who are brilliant on their knowledge with banking system, the way that the bank works, the way with the audit of the balance sheet, everything. But they might lack system knowledge. On the other extreme, you got youngsters who are very good in the system, but they lack the experience of banking, business, obviously. If this is the case, what to do? If this is the case, what to do? This is a problem, yes or no? Many of us face that. In fact, many of us, our heart rate goes up when somebody talks about anything in system. No, if you ask them why this balance is not telling, sorry, means there is one file which is actually having the variable in C, and that C and B are getting oppositely combined, and then you'll say, my goodness, thank you. And you come back and say, what answer did I get? First, let me tell you how banks today are facing a challenge from fintechs. Fintechs are stealing the market of banks. That's what was happening 2 years back. But obviously, fintechs, what is the downside? Of course, they are very agile, very innovative. What is the downside? No market, no money. On the other side, what do you have? You got market, you got money, but no idea. What is the only solution to do? Join hands. That's what the banks today are doing. SBI works with more than 2,000 fintechs, right? So all we chartered accountants also need to do is make use of the capability of these youngsters. Drive them to learn this, and believe me, by the next audit, you will have fantastic tools within your own firm. I'm not joking. You simply, a little bit encouragement you give these individuals, I'm telling you, they will do brilliant. All you need to do is your knowledge of what internal control, which filter, what it comes is where you have to tell them, and they'll be able to do that. So that is how we have to hit this. And of course, when when any senior person goes to the bank, please don't worry if you don't know, digital banking. No problem at all. Make that guy sit with you and ask him to do all that. He will do it for you. And you can keep on guiding him. I want this, I want that, I want that. He is obligated to give you that. Till you sign, they will have maximum respect for you. You know that. Right? This is RBI's diktat saying that banks are obligated to provide statutory branch auditors with. Now, this is where the problem starts for auditors. All this they are giving in. What am I supposed to do with this? What is this? Please see this. Overall IT and cyber security policy. As a financial auditor, what am I supposed to do with this? IT application architecture, structure and environment of the bank's IT system and changes there too. Okay, somewhat makes sense. Controls implemented for data integrity and security. Business continuity, disaster recovery arrangements, IT failures and issues, exceptions, workarounds, status report and compliance with RBI directions on IT security and controls. All these are supposed to be provided to the branch auditors. Good luck to you. Don't worry about this. See, idea is they are giving you how it works. It's a huge learning. As I always say, branch audits are our best opportunity to get into the area of system audit, which is nothing but the future. There is no going to be anything other than system audits. I am sure you can see that. Tell me one of your kids who takes a paper, pencil and writes. Very rare, isn't it? Very rare. That what comes easily to them, like the Chakruya Abhimanyu, is give them a mobile in 3rd month. So we have to understand that is how it is and see how to make use of this. So that is where it is very important. If we start getting this into the groove right away, believe me, you will get a lot of experience around handling. It is absolutely glorified common sense. I'm telling you that from my experience. I started off as just an enthusiast in technology. I didn't know anything about that. But believe me, when you start thinking like a chartered accountant and then you think technology, it becomes very easy. You always start with your strength and go to what is your weakness. Your weakness becomes the strength. And that is what you can do. So I always insist on this opening meeting, and this opening meetings, you better jot down the list of questions that you need to ask. It's a standard list that you can have. Like, first of all, you should have the branch manager, who's are all the kids, depending on the size of the branch. Have everybody by your side. Ask for any changes to the accounting system. What is the landscape of various IT systems? What are the problems you should face during the last year? If they don't tell you NPA, they are lying. Okay, then the global system issues, like what happened with the CPPD or the CPC, any cyber attacks, ATM system, RTGS, what is all under reconciliation, which is not reconciled, frauds in the bank, what is the modus of frauds, customer complaints, a very important giveaway area which we don't look at. If you simply take some of those customer complaints, they'll tell you this is I put my money like this, then I opened this, somebody asked OTP, I gave it like that, this is what happened. You'll get a very clear idea, and you can ask the branch, where is this reported to RBI? Because there is a mandatory requirement of auditors to see whether the frauds are reported to RBI, LFIR requirement, right? Then of course this meeting should be minuted, and you tell them right in advance that this meeting is being minuted. All of us have to sign on that. Do you think that the manager will give you wrong answers? He'll dare not, right? Because he'll sign off and then give you. And of course, always when you will have to require a CBS access. Whatever access they give you doesn't matter, but at least you put it in your email saying that you require a audit read-only access. Generally, as even Ms. Prema was saying, what do the managers do, sir? Take my system. Suicide, right? Okay. So of course, do a branch walkthrough, process walkthrough. There are a lot of guidance which is available today, technical guide. It's all there in the material, so don't worry about this. Now, transaction audit considerations. This slide, if you understand, we are done with the architecture of how things work. I already told you about the application layer, right? What is application? The software that churns out your transactions, right? What are all here are the key things which you'll find in most banks. Core banking system, card, digital banking systems, clearing system, SWIFT, trade finance, mail and messaging, intranet. This all you'll find it there generally in any branch, any bank, right? If you look at, just simply put this and see what transaction data hits your balance sheet, profit loss account that you are required to audit. You'll get a very clear picture. out of this. Then look at the other areas. For example, ATM, CDS, and kiosks. These sometimes they are attached to the branch, sometimes they are not. Right? So what you need to do is understand that and see how is the transaction routing to the branch customer account. Generally, it will be through the switch, goes to the ATM cell, gets churned out from there, gets distributed across the SOL IDs, right? So understand that. Similarly, cash deposit systems, kiosks. So all these are important areas to understand wherever transaction is getting. Of course, RBI has this time now asked you to comment upon cybersecurity controls. Don't worry about too much about that. For example, I'm sure you know how to look at whether file the return, take the acknowledgement, put it back into a file, everything can be done. Just need to make a start somewhere. If you do that, the end entire mechanical process will be automated. If you simply step into the next year of branch, if you automated that the first year, you just need to run that. Believe me, some activity that in our office that used to take 3 to 4 days, 1 hour gets done. Yes or no? How do we detect this? Simply ask for a change history report of that parameter definitions. Am I clear? Am I clear? Somebody needs more explanation? You're all very tired. Is it okay? Okay. So you understand what this is. So if you ask for a change history report, this is a standard report in any system. If you ask for a change history report with regard to interest rate, with regard to master changes in any account, any product, you will get all that data out. Why? Because, please understand, see, your master information, your KYC information, your mobile information, your address, whatever, all that data, etc. Do you think it will be entered every time? At the time of your customer creation, it is separately created with all your customer data. Then you have account information. I took this fixed deposit, OD against fixed deposit, then I took CC, then I took this, then I took that. All that comes in linked to that customer account at the account level. Is it clear? So, the master of masters, which is the customer code, whatever you configure here, applies to all the children? Yes? So if I have said that the bank PLR rate, which for these kind of accounts should be only this, at a product level, I'll give it? Yes or no? So it is a product level configuration. So you have configurable parameters at the product master level, at the customer master level, at the loan master level, or at an individual account level. For one account alone, you can have the variation depending upon policy. Yes or no? Branch powers. That's where branch powers comes in. So please understand, these are all the various masters, products, GL codes. GL code obviously is master, but who decides on GL code master? HO, right? So Similarly, customer master, employee master, loan master, type of charges master, TDS master, everything will have a master. And please understand, if the interest rate by chance is erroneously configured as 17% instead of 20%, I'm just taking an example. How many records will it apply? Across the year, all the records from the date it was configured, the same thing will apply. That is why it is important to take the change history of interest rate and effective date, and you'll be able to find out all these changes. Ask one of your juniors to simply match that with the relevant sanction, job done. Otherwise, even if one is not tallying, simply you can get a report for that particular product or whatever it is, forms your annexure for your P&L, revenue checking. Question today in LFAR today is, have you checked whether the interest rates have been appropriately configured in the system? Job is done, right? Similarly, these are all important. Interest rate table, finance charges table, penal interest table, sequence of set-off, very, very important thing. RBI has given a very clear clarification saying that the sequence of set-off of repayments in any account, what is the first thing to be set off? What is the first thing to be set off? Charges. Then penal interest. Then interest. Then this. So it comes in the same order. Then comes principal. Right? This obviously has to be supported by the bank's policy. You will have the policy documents available with the branch, and you have to find out whether in the system it is configured properly. I'll just show you. I'll show you that, sorry. Okay. So, similarly, there are masters for sector. Do you think you will keep on typing in the sector every time you create an account? Drop down. Drop down, where does it come from? Master. Yes or no? Right. So, security master, sector master, security, type of security, collateral security, equitable EM, or English mortgage. What is it that all is possible in the bank? So that is all given there. Then you have very important parameters master like interest rate flag, trigger. See, when should the interest apply? End of month, compounded annually, compounded monthly, compounded daily. What is the approach you want to take? And each of them has an impact on the balance sheet, yes or no? Profit loss account, right? So see that you get the interest rate flag. Then IRAC, NPA, I am discussing this separately because it's a very, very significant area now. Maker, checker, authorizer, configuration. Which transactions require 2 level of approval, which transaction requires single level of approval. All that is built into the system as a configuration master. So please, when you simply do transaction, simply off the record, if you simply do a black box audit, you'll be able to see this is not proper because the sanctioning authority, which is coming in the system, is different from what is in the policy. Straight away red flag, right? So then, of course, all this applies to all the transaction records. So traditionally, we have been taking volumes and volume of transaction and looking at ticking all that out. Our focus may be on smaller items, non-risk areas, wasting our effort. Whereas if you do come through this particular approach, you'll be focusing on the key areas, key parameters. You'll be able to get a wealth of findings. More importantly, protect the banks and the customer's position. And this is how a typical kind of, for lack of time, not going into this, a typical definition screen. This is where you define the parameters, right? This is for a product category. If you want to say, fixed deposit cumulative, one product, right? You can call it some way, say Swadhan scheme or some name they will have. All that is configured. Who will configure it? Planning cell, HO, right? Then this is with regard to limits configuration. What is the maximum limit, minimum limit? All that configurations, you will be able to see it here. You'll be also able to see, I told you day and exception report. You can configure the exception report here on the bottom. For what all I want exception report at what frequency. You can very easily get that, right? So that is configured. So with regard to internal controls in the CBS branch, number one, we have to understand all the business policy parameters, whether it is from the policy. For example, women loan, what is the age range, what is the security, etc. All that is configured in that product parameter, right? Similarly, if you take sanction level terms, At which level it will be configured? Customer master or product level? Sanction level. Customer master or product level? Account level. I put that question so that check you awake or not. Neither at the customer master, because sanction is for every facility, isn't it? So the terms of that apply to that particular facility. So it will come as part of the account level master, right? Account, as I said, is the subset of customer subset of product, right? So the powers, delegation of authority matrix, very important. In the audit report, we are having one statement, no, all transactions are within branch powers. How do you know? What procedure did you do? Please go and look up this particular screen. Branch powers, when you say branch manager power, credit manager power, with regard to various products, how much of sanction he can do, how much should be done in consonance with the regional office or zonal office, how much doesn't come under him at all. And this can vary within a year because it depends upon the policy changes. So please download that. You'll be able to answer that statement very clearly. Otherwise, that is where we see this collusion problem, the manager trying to do something during the period, on date of audit alone, on 31st March alone, everything is set right, all these frauds happen. It is an adjustment that they do with the customer to prevent NPA, all in good intentions. But for us, we have to do our job, right? Then similarly, MIS for decision making, monitoring, all this can, as I said, if you look up those files, you'll be able to get a lot of exception reports I already spoken about. And there are special items like the asset reconstruction department or your foreign exchange, NPA recoveries, SWIFT, etc. These require a special attention. I'm not covering it here, obviously. So obviously you have to get your commands right, whether it is Finacle or banks, is very important. You should know how to look for the exception reports, etc. And the 42 odd early warning systems, the number of observations by RBI on what all kinds of frauds are happening in the annual fraud report by RBI. These are very important pointers for us. And this has to be done much before the audit because this cannot be done during the audit. If you have to collect it as part of your checklist papers and do this. So you have a whole lot that we have collected over time, what kind of frauds happen. This is a high level list. You can go drill down and say, because once you know what is the balance sheet of the branch, you can simply tick off against those items, that should be included in the checklist for that branch. You can check that. Okay. I will stop here for any questions. I've been talking. Any question? Free time. Okay, this is an important section. I request your attention, please. Maybe another 15 minutes. I'll try to finish off as quickly I can. Are we okay? Thank you. This RBI on NPA automation, these are all RBI directions which have come since the last 2 years. This certainly requires our attention because as we know, advances is one of the most or the most important area of audit in any branch audit. So one, RBI says that the entire process of NPA identification, classification, provisioning, and passing of entries should be automated as part of core banking system. Each of these words are important. It cannot be a separate system. It cannot be even one process with manual intervention separately. Nothing is permitted. Just like this is called a straight through processing. What is it? Why? Because the figures are drawn from the CBS. The classification logic is already built in there. It churns it out, determines if it is an NPA. If it is an NPA, how long is it an NPA? Then goes into the classification of whether it is standard, doubtful, vagara. Then what? If it is found to be doubtful or whatever, requiring a provision, how much provision to be made? Everything can be automated? Should be automated? That's what RBI is expecting. Because there have been lot of violations in this in the earlier years. So it should be, and this is a new requirement, it should be ongoing, not merely, what is ongoing? Day to day, before the day end. You should have made sure all the NPA parameters have been populated and you know what is your NPA status by end of day, after the day end is run. Okay. ensure there is no scope for manual intervention, and check accuracy wherever there is crystallization of NPA date. This NPA date, they have played around like anything in the earlier. We have ourselves seen, we were shocked. Just before we were completing the audit, in one case we found it is coming from a different system into this system. They migrated. Then we saw the NPA dates, they're completely different. Then we asked them, what is this, sir? Some error has happened, we don't know. What the 40 crores provision additional? This kind of, it was a fraud according to me. I mean, sorry, I don't want to say that, but then, I mean, this is intentional. How can you, when you are a senior manager of a branch, when chief manager of a branch, you don't know this has happened. I won't agree with that, right? As if you don't know what is a branch business profile. You don't know whether you got all nice customers. You know that over time. Anyway. So the automation of identification, classification, provisioning, entire, we have discussed that, sorry, where the auditor identifies an NPA. The auditor showed, I'll tell you, please hear, this is a very important point. Now, we look at it and identify NPA. What is the first question that should come into your mind? Yes, sir? Why did the branch not identify it? Yes or no? How come they missed? Because it's automated. That is why RBI says you shall investigate the root cause of the system weakness and report it in your LFAR, and of course, if it is an MOC item, you have to provide for an MOC item. Right? Then RBI also says auditor, all this is auditor's responsibilities, please understand. Master data of loan accounts, you shall review the quality and correctness of master data. I told you what is master data, I explained so far, right? What are the parameters to check? I'm only giving you an example. Installment amount, tenure of loan, moratorium period, interest rate flag, limit setup, due date of first installment and installment amount. These are examples. All these are obviously in a master. We have to check those masters for new loan accounts and large advances every time. Take the change history for these critical parameters and see if in terms of large advances at least you find any variation. If there is a variation, there is reason to get down to the depth and see why the variation has come. So what if, again, the question is to be asked is, what if the master configuration is not properly configured? Obviously, you can understand incorrect application of interest, incorrect application of schedule. In fact, RBI has pointed out a very important thing. They are saying, see, when sanction is given, in especially project loans, you know what is the repayment terms? They will say within 6 months, without specifying date. Within 6 months from start of production. What is start of production is not determined then, it keeps on moving. So what are you trying to do? You're trying to provide within the terms of sanction a flexibility to the borrower. So they said everything has to be clearly specified. In fact, they've made a statement saying that even the existing sanctions should be reviewed if specific dates of repayment are not provided. They're saying that. So that should be done, and it should be obviously configured in the system. Otherwise, it will result in incorrect classification of NPA. Similarly, this year we have lost, I'm sure this has been spoken about in the morning, MSME restructuring, COVID-19 regulatory package. All this obviously will go to parameter configuration within the CBS. So you have to look for whether these have been properly configured, because see, please understand, this is only for limited period, for limited aspects and limited sectors. This should not be extended to everybody. So that configuration we have to see whether the configuration is according to the HO guidelines and RBI directions, and the configuration of the system has to be compared by somebody at a product level, right? Then very important again, linkage of all customer accounts to a single customer unique code, customer code, and we are talking first at, let us say, ABC and Company. ABC and Company, if there is, let us say, a current account, and current account has gone into a debit balance, that will not come as part of this customer account. They'll have one more another unique number. This problem is also detected where banks have merged, because there is a 10-digit, all banks are supposed to have a 10-digit unique number. But now what has happened is when they merge, one branch, one has a 10-digit, one has a 14-digit, one has a 15-digit. So you have a mapping. In mapping, what will happen? Vijaya KR will be here, KR Vijaya will be here, Vijaya KR will be here. All that nonsense will happen, right? So it's very important that the unique code identification is done. Look for any credit facilities and credit or deposit balance accounts held anywhere across the branch if it is not linked. For any exceptions, carefully check the NPA asset classification based upon the adverse classification. Right? Then group entities. I think Mr. Premnath also showed you certain examples. Group entity, in fact, most banks don't even have a systematic way of identification of groups. How you and me can do that? Do you think in the branch audit of 10 days we'll have all the comfort to do that? Not really. So it is important that we look at what is the approach that the bank is taking to the comment at least on the approach if it is not right. And obviously the group identification is supposed to be done not only just at the branch level or because the exposure is high, RO, ZO will also be involved. So they need to be part of this. So generally not linked by default CBS, hence it has to be carefully checked. I'll tell you what happens in most cases. Yes, sir. Sir, very good question. You remember Mr. Premnath showed one chart. Idea is, let us take this case of Nirav Modi. I think Mr. Sonawala explained about accommodation bills. Director's sister is there in this account, that is there in that account. So the definition of group account is given by RBI. So you have to make sure that is automated in the system. Obviously, the relationship has to be picked up by the system. See, if you take your tax audit report for corporate entities, you got all interested parties, no? They're giving full data. Similarly, in your company law report, you're giving full data. Same thing has to be applied here. So that is what is group entities. That has to be configured in the system. Then only you'll be able to easily identify. For us, I would think you ask for what is the methodology of identification of group accounts as per head office methodology, or you look in the system, take a couple of samples and ask them to explain. If you are not satisfied, please put it in the LFIR that you are unable to satisfy yourself with regard to the group account classification. That is enough for the time being. Because it's for the statutory auditor again take it up, I mean the central statutory auditor to take it up at the central level. Then, as I said, very important, file examination. A very important procedure which is now becoming history. And, number of inspection of units that we used to go earlier was much larger. Thanks to COVID, it has become zero now. Isn't it? But that I can tell you, seeing is believing, no? As you are saying, in fact, we went, I can still remember, it was Karnataka here only. We went to one stockist of sandalwood. We chose it because sandalwood, let's see what it is. This fellow had a huge yard wherein they were storing all this. When we visited, what do you expect when I visited? Of course, tea, coffee and all. They gave me 2 sandalwood. Sir, this you keep. We'll go. What will you do? If you're a good auditor, would immediately antenna will go up, isn't it? Oh, sandalwood at the beginning itself, huh? So how much sandal paste they are going to apply upon you? Right? When we went there, biggest challenge we had was we could not identify which is sandalwood, which is not sandalwood. See, they had a similar looking wood which is sitting there. Now I try to smell. How much I can smell? No. See, the sandalwood, I understood that not every sandalwood simply raw, you will smell that. You have to do something for that too. There are some various grades of sandalwood. The entire stock is protecting the, securing the cash credit account across some places. Then we ask them, okay, this is that much there. Where is the rest of the stock? Consignment distributors. Okay, what is the confirmation? Let us see one fellow who is near your city. Today he has gone to his native for celebration. So we wrote whitewash because they had no valuation. There is no expert valuation of such item because this is a technically, it needs some expertise. So we wrote, I gave the sandalwood back to him, even though a little bit of pinch, I love sandalwood. We came out of that. So things like this can happen. Date of NPA, very important. As I said, RBI says, review and compare the date of NPA of loans accounts mentioned in current year statements with that of the previous year and investigate any changes in the report and report that. In fact, I am happy that RBI came out with this. We had this problem for a long time when we used to discover this. How can NPA date change? Because generally, we only look at what has become NPA during the year. But what has become NPA during last previous years, we don't check. Maybe we'll check immediate previous year. But something has become NPA in the last year, so obviously a DA, isn't it? By this time. But when you start looking at it, you will find there is some fishy things across that. Then NPA advances which are upgraded during the year. RBI is very strict on that, saying that check if upgradation configuration in CBS is compliant with the criteria specified for upgradation and the sanction. We have to check configuration, which is, because you'll go and change the configuration, no? Because now the NPA date is shifted. So that you will look at. Then caution with the partial recoveries subsequent to cutoff date. All these are frauds which have been discovered. If due to NPA identification is not done on a continuing basis, then obviously the account slipping into NPA will not be detected because it will be treating as a standard item. Right? So these are some of the areas. Then, of course, we have to understand if there is an investment in the branch that you are auditing. That is another important area to see. Because NPA and NPI, non-performing investments, also got to be provided. Generally, branch levels, except foreign branches, you will not have that. But in case you are getting that, be just careful about that. We already told about no manual nutrition supported wherever there is an upgradation due to exceptional reasons. They say actually error has happened. RBI clearly says at least 2-level authorization should be there. Authorization cannot be at the same level as the maker. Goes without saying. Branch auditor should obtain the exceptional report containing all such exceptions and audit that, and if there is a suspicion, report it in the LFAR. Again, it also says that the pre-day end process happens at the branch level. See, who is going to give the data? Suddenly they'll say, no, they'll given a revised valuation of security. Where will it come from? Branch level, isn't it? They'll say, no, customer has given revised stock statement, revised valuation of whatever, some nonsense they'll give. So if we have to understand all that data comes at the branch level, gets into CBS, goes through day end process, comes back to the branch as reports. Input comes from branch. So obviously we have to check such items where input is coming from branch, especially with regard to the automation items. And obviously it says for this circular, RBI has, branch auditors have to ensure this. So simply going by what I had shown earlier, now this is specific or advances. As I said, product, GL codes, customer loan, deposits, non-funded accounts, interest type master, finance charges master, penal rate master, computation logic, user ID, maker, checker, authorizer, IRAC, NPA classification, parameterization. All this, it is repetition of something that I said earlier, but specific to this is what has also to be checked as part of our audit. This is a one-time activity. Every year you don't have to do this kind of intense activity on that. So that is how this works. So of course, this is with regard to the automation aspects like SMA flagging, NPA flagging, IRAC classification, provisioning, scale of provisioning, sequence of adjustment, all this I talked about. And obviously everything has to be through the CBS. Okay, this I already covered. So this is what I said, how the sequence is set. You see on the top sequence, CIFPOLANU, something is written there. Nothing but how they will adjust the system will automatically set off whenever repayment comes. That is the logic. So we have to check this because this is what determines. Otherwise, it will slip. Okay, this is something which is generally not automated, like appraisal of the borrower. Of course, in some cases it is being done by the system, but obviously the manager is obviously taking the responsibility for that. Document execution and verification, security valuation. Security valuation is outside the system. Therefore, we got to obviously see that carefully as a documentation examination exercise. Interpretation of business performance, forced reconciliations, then justification of direct GL entries passed through any customer account is obviously something which cannot happen. We have to look at it. Circumventing any kind of system control. So all this we have to see outside. I'm just skipping this. I have covered these aspects. They are just an expansion. You can look at this circular of 12th number 21 where they gave certain clarifications as well with regard to how the day-end process, etc. for this should be on the ongoing basis. And this is with regard to potential fraud aspects like multiple customer accounts, marking of borrower group not done, right? Customer credit score in CBS, which is important for quick mortality identification, SMA, whether that is coming in there. Term sheet, margin, moratorium, EMI, etc. the computation of that. The others I covered, the refacement, the one-time settlement, etc., especially COVID with authorities, this done, devolved bills. So these are some of the aspects which also influence. See, while I may seem to be giving a lot of data, but you understand I'm not talking something out of the blue, isn't it? You know what are the loan parameters. Only thing you have to look for it in the masters. Simple. That's what I'm trying to say. In the masters, you have to come with the attached conditions. For example, if we say interest applicability, at what rate? First question. When? Second question. What frequency? Question. Fourth, what is the method? Question. Daily compounding, etc. I told you. So we have to look at this sub-parameters being also addressed as part of the parameterization process. Okay. So I will just, I think, finish with this. Just maybe 5 minutes I'll take to say these are with regard to the newly introduced things recently from the LFAR requirement, especially as I said, internal controls opinion by branch auditor also today becomes important because RBI is asking questions, for example, on this, wherein reporting by the central statutory auditor, especially with regard to internal control issues, specific comments on advances, specific failures in process, but RBI has said the branch auditor at their level has to contribute to the understanding of the central statutory auditor, bring to any their attention any aspects that they observe with regard to that. And any controls that are found to be weak has to be reported. So all this we have discussed, but this has to figure in the section where it talks about books of accounts and talks about whether the auditor has come across anything with regard to automation of various aspects. So this is what the various aspects of automation, like books and records, whether there is any software, etc., user which are not integrated with CBS. How can I find out? First, as I said, do that mapping analysis. You will know which all software is there. 2, look for the suspense accounts, which all reconciliations are done. You will know these are items which are not integrated. If there is a straight through processing, there is no reconciliation requirement. You understand that, right? So wherever there is reconciliation, that is a gray area to be tested. Then adverse features through any large branches have an IS audit separately, where there are multiple divisions, etc. Normal small branches, there will be no IS audit reports. There will be only very few audit parameters which are done by based upon risk-based supervision audits that may be done. Generating, verifying, and actioning on exception reports, manual intervention outside AP, CBS, then audit to comment on in data. And this is where the tension comes. Auditors to comment on data integrity. What should I do? So as I said, you don't need to do anything out of the world. You just keep these parameters in mind. As you're stepping through all this, you know where the weaknesses are. Bring that out into the data integrity issue. As simple as that, right? Checking correctness, integrity of data, no backend strategies, etc. So all this again comes at these 2 levels. Reconciliations, I told you all, see, these are all normal reconciliations which you'll find in most of the branches. Subsidiary GL balancing, RTGS, SWIFT reconciliation, OLTAS, GSTN, ATM switch suspense, cash suspense, then wallet suspense, clearing suspense, any kind of parking accounts, inter-office, all this is something which is generally part of any of these reconciliations. I'm just skipping this. These are all simple, straightforward things. You know, dormant account marking, lien marking, all this is system based, right? So you take few samples, ask your guys to, you know, simply do that, that is enough, right? Even if you check 2 or 3 transactions in large value items, you know that the system is working or not, right? This contingent liabilities, again, I think he has already well explained on that in the morning, but all I would say is everything is system configured. Please go and look at how the system configuration is in each of these areas. These are with regard to special items like multiple channels in any branches which are exposed. Private banks, you will have all this, right? Treasury operation, derivative operations, service branches, etc. And last but not the least, as I said, the cybersecurity checks in branches like antivirus updates, the Windows updates, internet access, certain basic checks, the physical security of the router. See, in a branch, there is no server today, right? There is only the router. It is just like your home. In home, you have a router. You connect everything. Same thing at the branch. Branch, nothing else is there except the 4 walls. Nothing is different. They can sit anywhere and do it actually. But the important thing is this router, if you look at the way it is placed, the entire branch transaction balance sheet is going through that, right? No key will be there. You will rather take some duster and put off the dust. So much dust will be there. Because the branch manager doesn't care about all that. It is HO data center problem, right? So if you observe any of this, please do say that the upkeep of this equipment is because, see, all these are sensitive electronic equipment, right? Generally, what branches they have is they have a spare router, which is not available maybe at the branch, but it will be available at the nearest nodal point. It will be available there. So immediately they're supposed to replace all that. But all said and done, if you inquire with the branch in the opening meeting, how many times you had downtime in the branch because of either power issues or because of networking issues, you will get the sense. They are supposed to have a UPS backup. Generally, they won't test the UPS backup. You switch off the UPS, the entire power will go. They are supposed to make sure that the inverter comes on, isn't it? It will not come on. So these are some critical issues. It may not always there is separate inverters for the router, separate inverters for the lighting. Because if you put the AC on the same router, you know what will happen, right? On the same inverter. Then fraud, yeah, this time fraud, lot of areas are there. I just cover the key items here. Frauds, these are RBI, the LFR requirements. All frauds detected and classified by the branch but not reported to RBI has to be reported by auditor. 2. Report on suspected or likely fraud cases which are reported by the branch. The auditor is required to examine that and provide the details in the LFAR. 3. The auditor has to give the red flag on the whatever red flags that he observes as part of any transaction or potential fraud, he has to give that. Auditor to comment on potential fraud risk areas. As for example, maker checker is not being put through for restructuring accounts or upgradation of NPAs. All that can be brought out here. Then, as it was spoken well, I think umpty number of times, both the speakers, whether system of early warning framework is working effectively, and obviously these are those already RBI recommended conditions, and whether red flag accounts are identified in a timely manner. Last but not the least, please have digital work papers. I think he has already covered in this, but important to make sure you are archiving them because you don't know when the RBI will call you for audit you might have done sometime, right? So always make sure you got adequate backups, properly labeled. Otherwise, it will say file 1. You know that tension, no? When you are getting that hearing with the department, then you say, ask your fellow, Appa, where is all this analysis of this data? Everything is there, sir. Where? In this folder, 24 files are there. Which file? File 1, file 2, file 3, ABC 1, custom 1. Some in naming convention of our files in our office is very important aspect. Otherwise, your own return you cannot find. You know that, right? Okay. So I always say this, it's my belief for me, if you don't change with time, and end with Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi's, which I always feel is very important, your own self-realization is the greatest service you can render to the world. With this, thank you. I hope it was useful. I'm sorry I was a little fast, but I hope you got what needs to be done. Yes? Yes or no? Thank you. Okay. Oh, any questions you have? I know it is. Home is calling you. Yes, yes. Actually, I made a lot of changes. Yes, I have made a lot of because I wanted to bring certain perspectives. And generally, I have so tight schedule was there. I sent the background material. I'll send that. No problem. Thank you. And thanks to all my friends at the branch, Srinivas and everybody, all old friends here and my new friends. So thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure always to be at Bangalore. I sincerely hope this is useful to you. Those of you who attended my last lecture, anybody here? I hope it was useful. Did you apply it? Oh, thank you, sir. That's the biggest reward for me. Thank you. Please do get in touch if you have any queries or anything. Thank you.
Members, we have come to the close of this session and on CBS of branches by the one and our own learned Mr. CA Vittal Raj. Thank you, sir. So you have briefed us on the subject superbly and have covered all the touch points. We believe the session was interesting as beneficial to all the members, though it is not the match for the magnitude and the simplicity of Mr. CA Vittal Raj. We need to honor him. And may I request Mr. Rijo, Management Committee member, to please hand over the memento to him as a mark of respect and gratitude. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yeah. May I request the Secretary, Mr. Pramod, to brief on the today's occasion.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Tupat. I consider it to be a proud privilege to propose vote of thanks for the one-day branch audit seminar. Today's event has been a great success due to the members present physically and virtually. I must express my deep gratitude to our respected chairman for the initiative he took in holding this event and deciding to invite the eminent speakers for and guidance given to us so that this becomes a great success as well. I also express my sincere thanks to all esteemed guests and the eminent speakers and the members who have taken keen interest in the program and have taken time out in their busy schedule to actively participate in this event. Hope this session made a value addition to your knowledge kitty. I also wish everyone to have a great bank audit season. Lastly, my thanks are due to my colleagues in the committee and the officers and the staffs who have worked with great dedication to make this program a grand success. I also thank our sponsors, Jwalamukhi Printers, Purple Blue for the stage and camera, staff and hotel management of Chancery Pavilion for the excellent infrastructure. Thanking you all for being part of this event and making this event a great success. Thank you.